So the examples and the idea of ideology, well, I want to say this about ideology. How does ideology work? There are three different ways that ideology can work. The first is through simple construal. That is to say, the 3-year-old asks him or herself, why did I do this drawing? And the answer is drawing is fun, or the answer is I wanted to get a good player award. So the imposition of a reward like that can change the way people construe the activities they engage in. And the effect of that is that the next time around, if there's no promise of reward, if the kid thinks I did it the last time for the reward, he or she won't do it this time. So there are no interventions by anybody else. That's not the only mechanism. Second mechanism is that others can respond to you based on their presumptions about why you do the things you do. This is what's sometimes called the self-fulfilling prophecy. It was captured in a book called Pygmalion in the Classroom, where teachers who think they're teaching smart kids teach the kids differently than if they think they're teaching kids who are not so smart. So there's an interaction between what the teacher understands about the kid and the way the teacher teaches the kid that makes the kid conform to the teacher's expectations. It's not just about construal. The teacher actually does something different. And the factory case, the one that I think is most profound and potentially most troubling, is when an entire institution gets created so that only certain kinds of motives, only certain kinds of incentives can be fed, others are ruled out. When you create a workplace in which it's impossible to get satisfaction out of what you do, sure enough, the only reason people do anything is for the incentives. So this is how I think ideology can work its magic. And again, the important point is that it starts out as a false idea technology, but as it remakes social institutions, it becomes a true idea technology. It is no longer false because all of the examples in society conform to this picture of what people are like. So, if this is true, that is, if we are creating a phenomenon rather than merely discovering it, then there have to be alternatives to the notion that whatever people they do because of what it gets them. So what are the alternatives? A psychologist named Alan Fiske some years ago wrote a really quite brilliant and general account of the different ways in which social relations can be ordered and organized. One of them, communal sharing, is what Steve was talking about. And, you know, you need milk? Take some of mine. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. This is sort of the way families are supposed to operate and small villages operate. The rules of social engagement are rules of communal sharing. Authority ranking is that there's a boss who tells other people what to do. This is, you know, characteristic in the military, and I guess in law school, at least in the first year of law school. Equality matching, reciprocity. You ask your neighbor to mow your lawn because you're going to go away. What do you do for your neighbor? Do you give him a tip? You buy him a box of candy? No, you will just offer to do the same thing for him when he goes away. You match favors with favors. That's what reciprocity means. You try to pay people back in kind. And finally, there is market pricing. And the virtue of market pricing is that things have prices. You can have transactions now between completely anonymous agents who are acting at a distance. You don't need to know anything about the person you're transacting with, who doesn't need to know anything about you. It's much more convenient to write a check than it is to mow your neighbor's lawn. And Fiske's argument is that every society is composed of these 4 different kinds of social relations. Societies differ from one another in several ways. They differ in how they divide up the pie, what goes into which bin, and they differ from one another in how dominant one or another one is. But even in a society where, say, market pricing is dominant, it's not the case that any particular activity is purely a market pricing activity. And now I'll show you the kind of data I collect. Here's an example of mixed understandings. Are these just guidelines or are they actually new policies? There's a sense in which there is more than one kind of relation. So these are cases where more than one mode of relating to other people is involved in a given domain. There's no question, if you transgress, if you make a mistake, if you treat a communal, a market pricing relation as if it were a communal sharing relation, people notice. That's a social faux pas. If you get well served by your server at a restaurant and you get up and give your server a kiss and say thank you, that's a faux pas. If, however, after Thanksgiving dinner you give your mother a $20 tip, that's a transgression. So Fisk's argument is that when you use market pricing in domains where it doesn't belong, it's regarded as a moral violation, whereas when you use the less rigid forms of social relations in domains where they don't belong, they're just minor embarrassments. And the question is, what happens when one of these kinds of social relations becomes so dominant that the others virtually disappear? This is what other people have referred to as economic imperialism, to capture the idea that market relations, exchanges among anonymous agents of goods and services, is the most efficient way to organize our lives. Here's what happens. I have a lot of these data, but I figure you need a break. Now, the thing to notice about I'm sorry, here's the economic imperialism.